Okay. Welcome, everybody. It's been a long time. It's been a very long time. Has it been like a month? Wow. Okay. So we'll do like a very, very brief review, but today we are beginning Perek Memalef, which is a very pivotal and honestly such an important Perek for us to be speaking about, especially now, starting the days of El before Rosh Hashanah. It's an important parak to be thinking about every day. In fact, a lot of young children memorize parak mamalef as it, not just parak lama beis. Like if you think about the prakim that people actually memorize or children memorize, the first three prakim is usually the first one. Hello. The first one because it's the first parak, and then there's parak lama beis, which speaks all about Avos Yisrael, and there's parak mamalef, which is a parak that is fundamentally about our relationship with Hashem and primarily focuses on yira, on fear. Now, what's interesting is that oftentimes when you think of a relationship, the first thing that you think about in a relationship is love, how much you love the person that you want to connect to, right? Imagine a relationship between a parent and child, a relationship between you and your best friend, a relationship between husband and wife. Obviously, there has to be so much love there. And what's fascinating is that the Alter Rebbe says it is not a relationship before it begins with yira. And most people don't give enough credence to the Alter Rebbe's words. He says, Reishes Havaida v'ikra v'sharsha. The beginning of the work, the main point of the work, the root of the work in a relationship is yiras Hashem, is yira, is fear. Now, we're going to be embarking on a bit of a journey in discussing this, and next time, maybe 3 classes, we'll see. What is exactly fear? What are we talking about when we say fear? When we say Yira Shemayim, a lot of things come under that umbrella term. And I want to see if we can break it down as much as we can to help us understand what it is of what we're talking about. Because what we're not talking about, let's just rule that out, is we're not talking about we're just like trembling in our boots, right? We're not just thinking like, I'm just so afraid. There's a space for that, and we'll talk about that as a level, because that is good, right? A fear of Einesh is a good thing. If it's going to stop you from sinning, then that's a good thing. And we'll leave to that. And at the same time, that's not the one thing that we're talking about when we talk about Yira Shemayim. Oftentimes, a more spiritually inclined person doesn't get so excited about the concept of Yira Shemayim. Why? They want to feel spiritual. They want to feel connected. They want to feel uplifted. Yira Shemayim is not supposed to be a downer. It's not supposed to be too intense or too serious. In fact, it's so interesting. I was teaching a shir this morning about Eshes Chayil, and the pasuk that we were focused on was Oiz v'hadar levusha v'tischach li'amachrein. And we were talking about Oiz and Hadar. Oiz is might and Hadar is splendor. And how a woman garbs herself with might and splendor. We were talking about what does might mean. According to the Mefarshim, might means that she has this inner strength, this amazing courage to prevent from doing a sin. Okay, so Oiz or strength or Gevura, all of these are basically all grouped together. Oiz, Gevura, Yira, they're all on the same line, and they're all basically in the same family. And we're going to be talking about and breaking down what those all mean. But to just lay it out, there's a certain discipline to fear, to Yira Shemayim. There's a certain respect. There's distance, there's space, there's acknowledging. All of those words are going to come into this concept of Yira Shemayim. And this so far has been me, but we're going to talk about Rabbi Paltiel's shir, where he shares a lot of different stories that will illustrate what it looks like to be a person who lives with Yira Shemayim, to like the greatest extent, like a tzaddik who has a very refined, a very spiritual Yira Shemayim, and even the layman, and what Yira Shemayim looks like for us, for me, rather. Start with the first story. The Rebbe Marash talks about one experience that he had when he was traveling. He was staying in, I think it was in France. He was in a hotel in France. I believe it was France. Point is that he looked out onto the courtyard and he sees a regiment of soldiers, and they're performing some sort of drill. So their drill sergeant is giving them commands, and they're immediately reacting with absolute precision, with not even a moment's delay. They immediately follow his command. And the Rebbe Marash turns away from the window and he says, why can't Chassidim be like this? Right? Why can't my Chassidim be like this? And the obvious answer is a soldier is very different than a chassid, but he was trying to illustrate something. He was trying to bring something out. There's a certain discipline to a soldier. There's a certain deference that a soldier has to his higher commander. And there's something about the immediacy and how incredibly focused that soldier is on his commander. And that is what he was highlighting. He wants to bring out the concept of Yirah Shamayim and what the soldiers felt towards their commanding officer, the Yirah that they felt there. Another example of this, and we're gonna keep on bringing out this concept, is, and it's very interesting because I just had this yesterday. So my 5-year-old just started school, and we had orientation yesterday, and the teachers are all speaking, and who comes in? One of the Rebbe's comes in and he's wearing like the general's hat for Tzivos Hashem, and he makes a presentation to these 5-year-olds of the start of Tzivos Hashem. And my son is just listening spellbound. Like, we're going to get medals. How are we going to do this? How are we going to rise up in our ranks? And he's so excited about this, to the extent that this morning we're about to go to school and he's like, oh my goodness, I didn't watch Negavash a second time and I need to do this so that I could rise in my ranks in Tzivos Hashem. Why is that so incredible? How could we hear the absolute, it's funny to say this, but the genius of the Rebbe in starting a campaign, literally like a military campaign of Tzivos Hashem? Why did he do it? So what's interesting is that there was a doctor, a child psychologist, who after the Rebbe came out with this military campaign and started speaking to the children in these terms, and very much it uses army language. You have certain ranks and you rise in ranks, and there's generals and there's sergeants and there's captains, and they're issued orders, and it very much uses all the language of the army. And this doctor, this child psychologist, who was a very smart person, wrote to the Rebbe, and he was so angry. Why would you bring to the children of our generation violence? Why would you bring that to them when you could bring them, I don't know, goodness, chesed, something else, not a system of violence and killing? And the Rebbe wrote back a 3-page letter explaining why he started Tzivos Hashem, which was very unusual for the Rebbe. The Rebbe usually gave very pithy responses when it came to letters, because there were hundreds of letters to respond to. The Rebbe spent 3 pages on this and explained that from the time that when he landed in America, he has been watching America's systematic decline and seeing how children from the generations before are changing, and how there's so much less respect, there's so little discipline. And after much contemplation, the Rebbe says, thinking about it for a long time, and by that he means years, the Rebbe thought about this and thought about it. What could I do to not just contribute to our children, but to bring as an idea to the world? And the only idea he said was, the best idea he said was to bring this concept of an army and soldiers. Why? Because soldiers are not about killing. It's not supposed to be about killing. It's about discipline. And that's what he wants to bring to the children of this generation. He wants to bring them this concept of discipline. Why? Because discipline is under the same category as yira, as respect, as space, as an understanding that there's something above me, there's something beyond. I'm not the only one that I have to answer to. I have others to answer to. And when I understand that there are ranks and there are people above me that I need to answer to, that from a very young age inspires me to understand the concept of respect, to understand the concept also of discipline. So even if I understand, let's say, what is society based off of? Society is based off, it's built off of fear. And a moral society is built off of fear of heaven, fear of Hashem. So what the Rebbe was bringing to us with this concept is, if we want to be a society that is a moral society, and yes, a society is based on all the fear, the societal pressures, so then let's at least inspire our youth to live as good community members and actually have deference to and consideration to others, those greater than them, those older than them, whatever it is, the concept of having deference. And unfortunately, that's something that is becoming a lost art. Even when the Rebbe started the campaign of teaching the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, it had the same underlying theme. The Rebbe did not say, you should keep Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. So Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach are the 7 mitzvahs that a non-Jew is supposed to keep. Every person in the world has to keep these 7 mitzvahs. We were given 613, and non-Jews are given the 7. And when the Rebbe spoke about Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, not that it became a huge campaign, but when he did speak about it, he didn't speak about it and say, if you keep these mitzvahs, then it's going to be better for you. You're going to have a better life. You're going to be able to keep a job. You'll be able to be married once and not get divorced 17 times. He didn't say that. He didn't say your quality of life will get better. He used this line, ayin raya, an eye sees, va'eisen shemas, and an ear hears, the chol ma'asacha b'sefer nechtavim, and all of your actions are written down. What's the message? What's the subtitle of that? The theme behind that is you have to keep the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, not because it will enhance your life and it's a good thing for you and you'll get 2 thumbs up. It's because there's an accounting at the end of your life. And you have to remember that everything is being written down. And it's not just this frivolous life that you get to live. There's an accountability here that the Rebbe wanted to impart to all people of this generation. And that's an important thing. And that's something that non-Jews very much can relate to and can hear. So what is this? What is this yira that we're talking about here? So far, we threw out a few examples, a few words: discipline, accountability, gevura, structure, acknowledging something beyond, deference, respect, space. All of these English words, which are so important because, the Hebrew language is perfect, obviously, but with the English language, you literally have like 10 times the amount of words than the Hebrew language. So there's just more details. There's more breaking down of the subtleties of what we're actually talking about here. All of those words are encapsulated in the word yira. So the Alter Rebbe then gives some examples to help us understand what is he trying to bring to us when he's talking about Yiras Shamayim and what that means to enter into a relationship with Hashem and how that has to be first even before love. So it's actually funny, in this week's Parsha, this past week's Parsha, we have the mitzvah of appointing a king. Saim tesem alech melech, you should appoint for yourselves a king. And Chassidus talks a lot about what it means to appoint for yourself a king. Nowadays, we don't have a king. What does that mean? We don't even really have a relatability to what a king is, president or a person in the higher ups. But we don't necessarily have the same aima, the same fear that a person who lived with a king in their life has. But the example is important. What is a king? A king is this one person who politically has a lot of clout on your life, meaning he affects your material, superficial world. Everything about your life, whether the taxes are going to be heavy and hard, whether there's going to be, a street running through your town or the next town, which will bring more people, which will impact your parnasa, he really directly impacts you. And at the same time, a Jewish king is supposed to be something else as well. A Jewish king is supposed to be a leader. He's supposed to also be a nasi. He's supposed to carry the people. He's supposed to inspire the people. He's also supposed to teach the people Torah and mitzvahs. So when we talk about melech, the reason why the Alter Rebbe is bringing the melech servant example is because when you think of a melech and how directly he impacts your life, it inspires you to look at him with absolute deference, to realize this person's beyond me. And I think about him in the back burner of my mind all the time. What does the king think about our town? What does the king think about my actions? Do I represent him as a citizen of his capital city? There's a recognition of him there. It's not just me. It's not all about me. It's also, there's him involved in every action I take, in the way that I think about my world. That is one measure of yira that the Alter Rebbe wants to bring. It's the deep recognition and acknowledgement, a constant acknowledgement of the Eibishter, of Hashem in my life. And there are lots of mitzvahs that we do to help us get to that space, right? So tefillin is supposed to be an example of that. When a man wraps tefillin, he wraps it on his arm and on his head, and it's supposed to signify that he has mayach shalat al alev, where even if his passions and his heart and his emotions lie in one direction, his mind recognizes the Eibishter, recognizes Hashem in his life, and directs the rest of him. So his passions don't lead him, his mind leads him. It's actually an interesting thing. I'm trying to remember. There are some women throughout history that have also worn tefillin. And not just wearing tefillin like men wear nowadays, but wore tefillin a whole day, right? Like men used to. Nowadays, it's not shaykh for us to be able to wear tefillin a whole day. Why? Because when you're specifically wearing tefillin, you specifically have to be having mayach shalat al alev, where your mind is ruling over your heart. At least when you're wearing it, you should be completely focused on Hashem and Eibishter in your life and how that's directing your passions and what you're feeling like. But there were women who actually lived that mindset. They were so structured and they were such yir shemayim, and they had so much me'ach shalat al-alev, their brain ruling over their heart, that it was okay for them to also be wearing tzitzis. Probably also. Yeah, Rashi's daughters also wear tzitzis. And who's the other person I'm thinking about? Michal. Michal, who was Shaul's daughter and David HaMelech's first wife, wore tefillin. And the reason being was because she was the person, she was of the caliber that she could wear tefillin. Having that constant acknowledgement of Hashem. Men wear kippahs every single day. It's supposed to be a reminder that there's someone above. A lot of Sephardi shuls you could see in Israel, in the shul, it's painted blue. Either the walls or the ceiling is painted blue. It's supposed to be a reminder not just of the words that are over the mantle, Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Samid. I don't know if you have it here. But Shivisi Hashem L'negdi Samid is a refrain that a Jew is supposed to have throughout his everyday, where Hashem is standing before me. So if I have a blue ceiling while I'm davening, it's a reminder of the sky, of Shemayim, of heaven, of there's someone watching. And that someone is not supposed to inspire terror. It's supposed to inspire accountability. It's supposed to be a reminder of who I am and why I'm here. An interesting concept that comes along with this, when you think about relationship, like I was saying in the beginning, you think of love, you think of expression. How do we bond? How do we connect? Here's the thing. When it comes to connecting, let's say, with a husband and wife, if a wife is connecting with her husband, and the way she connects with him is she does the things that she likes to do, and when he makes a suggestion, she kind of shuts it down and says, no, let's do this instead. What's happening? Or vice versa, right? If the husband does the same thing, they only do things that he wants to do, or they only talk about things that he thinks are important or interesting to discuss. What's happening is that their relationship is somewhat there, but it's all within the context of one person in the relationship. There's no space for somebody else, right? So if she doesn't like something that he does, and make sure to tell him so that he stops doing whatever he's doing, what's happening is that there's less space for him to just exist the way he is. I don't know, let's say she doesn't like the pants that he's wearing, and he likes wearing those pants. He's allowed to be him. Right? But what happens is there's a lack of respect if she starts telling him what to do, or if he starts telling her what to do. What's happening is that instead of the relationship just being built on love, which love is very loving and beautiful, but there's also a lack of respect. And if there's no respect, there's no space for a relationship to begin, to be, to exist, because it's all within the context of him or herself. I care about you as long as you are like this. Then we have a relationship. Then we're good. As soon as you start wandering away from my vision or the way I feel about how you should be showing up in this relationship, I don't like the way this is anymore. We're not connected. that's not a relationship. Relationship is two people stand in their own right, and they have space for whatever it is that's coming up for them, right? So now take that and apply that concept to our relationship as a child of the Eibishter, our relationship with Hashem. If I only relate to my relationship with Hashem from the context of me, so if I feel good, I want to daven. So that feels really good for me. So I'm going to daven. But then later on, when I get on the phone with my sister, and I know in the back of my mind, it's not good to talk about someone else, but I'm just gonna, what's happening? I connect with Hashem within the context of myself. This feels good. I like this. So we're connected. I love you. I do all these mitzvahs that make me feel love. But when it comes to what he wants or remembering him in my life, I put like this very easy block. What's the word I'm looking for? Doesn't matter. It's a way of blocking out that he's a part of my life, and I only interact in the space of me in this relationship. Where is he in this relationship? I'm forgetting that part. That part is yira. That part is gevura. That part is restraining yourself and remembering that he also has a say in this relationship. He's part of it. It's not just about me. So, a really interesting example, and this is obviously a very high caliber example, but I think it's a really beautiful one, is Rabbi Paltiel shares the story about his father. His father escaped from Russia and basically started the migration across Europe to try to escape Stalin and then World War II. And what happened was he's traveling, he's 8 years old, he's traveling with a bunch of Lubavitcher Hasidim. They end up in France and they're staying at this chateau. Now that sounds really exciting because it's a chateau, but it's not. It was like a dilapidated, abandoned castle that probably had about 25 rooms, but you had 25 families living there. So everyone's living in one big house, each family to one room, and that's basically where they had to stay until they were relocated because they didn't belong anywhere. So Rabbi Paltiel's father, one morning, comes down the stairs and he sees a man from an older man from a different family. He's sitting at the front door of the house and he's crying. And when the little boy asks, he says, "What's wrong? What happened?" Thinking someone had passed away, which was very likely. Like everyone was in a trauma response then, right? Someone had passed away, someone was severely sick. The man shares he had overslept and he had passed Zman Kriya Shema, so he couldn't say Shema. Now, he's not performing for anybody, right? He was crying alone by himself. And this was the feeling that came out from this experience. He missed out on saying Kriya Shema at the specific Zman when he was supposed to say it. That made him cry. That's respect. That's Yireh Shamayim. That's someone who sees, who hears Hashem larger in his life than he sees and hears his own passions and what he wants out of life. Obviously, a very high level. But even to try to appreciate a story like that shows on a person who really deeply cares about Hashem in his world, in his life. There's a story about the Yismach Moshe who somehow was owed some sort of favor from a great tzaddik. I don't know exactly how this worked out, but the story goes that he wanted some payback for something that had happened, and he asked this tzaddik for the payback. What did he want? His desire was he wanted to feel the same fear, Yireh Shamayim, that the Rambam felt. He wanted to feel that level, that extent that the Rambam feels Yireh Shamayim. So tzaddik told him, there's no way you could feel something like that because that's way too much for you, even though he was a tzaddik in his own right. He said, but what I could do is I could give you the level of Yireh Shamayim that the Rambam felt while performing surgery. Okay, so imagine the Rambam was a doctor. So I don't know what surgery looked like in those days, but it was probably really exciting and very intense. Especially because the space where the Rambam was performing surgery was always like high risk and intense because he was of the court of the Sultan. So imagine the Rambam's performing a surgery and he's going to grant the Yismach Moshe the Yireh Shamayim that the Rambam experiences then. So you'd think what's a person doing while he's doing surgery? He's just laser beam focused on the task at hand. Nothing else matters right now, because if anything else matters, you could get distracted. You can't be thinking about your husband, wife, children while you're performing a surgery. You have to really compartmentalize. So Yismach Moshe was given this gift that he's going to experience the Yirah Shamayim that the Rambam felt while performing a surgery. As soon as he's granted that gift, he passed out. He went unconscious. Because that level of Yirah Shamayim that the Rambam felt, even whilst performing surgery, was too high for him to experience. And he passed out. He went unconscious. What does that mean? It means that the Rambam, obviously a very high level, but the Rambam's level of feeling Hashem's presence in his life, it wasn't even like, oh, someone's like looking over my shoulder. It was here. It's like my experience is a deep recognition of Hashem on a constant basis. And that's something that we should all be striving towards. Now, we live in a very physical world, a very material world, and it's hard. It's so hard to see Hashem always, when all you see around you is physicality and materialism, and all the Yetzer Hara is trying to do is distract you all the time. Even with Torah and mitzvahs, it could be a distraction sometimes. The Yetzer Hara could say, yeah, go learn, and the learning is all about you, and it basically has nothing to do with God. That happens all the time. So what can we do? So the Alter Rebbe says, listen, if you can't have the kind of ema, the kind of fear that a citizen has towards his king, or the fear of a citizen towards his king, at least have the fear of a master and servant, right? The master-servant example. What's a master-servant example? The servant has a level of anxiety all the time, whether the master is going to see that he did everything right, whether he performed well. He knows that the master is watching. So at least achieve that level of fear. At least, even if you're not quite afraid of the master, because maybe nowadays a master-servant example is not as relevant, but imagine even an employee-employer relationship, right? So it's a little more transactional, you're actually getting paid, so maybe you're not filled with fear, right? Imagine, I don't know, the people in Trader Joe's don't look like they're walking around in fear, but they still do have an employer. They look happy, they look positive, they still do have an employer, but what are they doing? They're doing what has to get done. There's a level of submitting when you're an employer. You have to listen to the will of whoever it is that's giving you instruction. And at least, the Alter Rebbe says, at least achieve that level of Yirah Shamayim. Because if you just do what you have to do, there still is a measure of Yirah Shamayim there. Because if you don't do what you have to do, you might get fired, or you can't be the servant any longer, or you'll get punished. That's not the motivating factor. That's not what's maybe the employee at Trader Joe's is thinking about, but there is a little bit of that there. That's why he's going about his day and doing what he has to do. That level of submitting, or in Hebrew words, kabbalas ol, just doing what has to get done, that's a level that's achievable to everybody. So the Alter Rebbe says, if at least you have some sort of kabbalas ol in your life, that's a level of Yirah Shamayim. Remember, what we're talking about here is we're trying to achieve the two wings. The Alter Rebbe gives that as an example of if you want to engage in a relationship with the Eibusher, you have to have two wings, Yira and Ava. Right now we're talking about the Yira. So right now we're building the wing of Yira. If you want to be able to have a relationship with the Eibusher, you need it to be able to have Yira. We all have it to some extent, because all of us, to some measure, have kabbalas ol. Whether we like to acknowledge it or not, we've done something for Hashem that we didn't agree with, or wasn't our favorite thing to do. And we decided, I'm just going to do it because it's the right thing to do. That, the Alter Rebbe says, is achievable, it's within your grasp, and that shows on a measure of Yira. And from there, you could build to the other example that we spoke about, which is the relationship between a servant and a king, where there's like an absolute servitude. There's an absolute complete recognition of the master over me. An interesting story is recorded in the Gemara about Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So we're talking about the leader of the generation during very turbulent times, and his students asked him to give them a bracha. And his bracha to them was that you should fear Hashem like you fear man. And his students were actually insulted. What do you mean? Fear Hashem like I fear man? I don't fear man. What does that even mean? And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai laughed. He said, you don't even recognize how much you're thinking about what other people are thinking. What is the neighbor going to say? What are the people, what's all the women of the women's section are going to say when my kid shows up wearing, I don't know, mismatched socks on Shabbos? Well, what's the rabbi going to say? What's he thinking? What's my best friend going to think when I show up late? We made up at this time and she said that time. What is all that? All the voices that you hear in your head, all of that is yira. It's giving deference to someone else, a different voice. You have that, and you have that good and well. We all have those voices. Some of them loom larger than others, but they're all voices to us. And those voices are an indication that we submit ourselves to somebody else's will or to somebody else's view or perspective or desire. If we could even have an ounce of that and kind of like translate that to what is Hashem's will, desire, perspective, and need of us, then we'll be able to have the Yiras Shamayim that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai then was trying to give a bracha to his students. We'll be able to see Hashem more than we see others, and we let others weigh in our lives. Now, how to do this practically? What does that actually mean? So the first way would be, as the Alter Rebbe has said consistently throughout up until now, is contemplating on Hashem. Give yourself the time of day to think about him. I was speaking to someone today and she says she has a sticker of Shavisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit in her car. Now, sometimes, you don't even see it anymore because it just becomes a constant and it's nothing. Your eyes just roam over it. But if you could build it into your day, that Shavisi Hashem L'Negdi Summit, or remembering Hashem and his impact, him being your entire world, thinking about his desires and his wants, and giving yourself some time throughout the day to think about him, that would impact your Yiras Shamayim and hopefully elevate your relationship to be less of just an employer-employee relationship and maybe more of a constant of remembering him in our world. I think one of the greatest gifts that the Thank You Hashem movement brought to the Jewish people are the words, Thank You Hashem. Maybe before people said Baruch Hashem all the time, but nowadays I feel like people say it so much more. It's like a by phrase. It's just something that it's on our lips to say Thank You Hashem constantly throughout the day. That's a reminder, an acknowledgement of Hashem being there constantly. He's around, he's involved. Which segues to the next piece, which is another way of reminding ourselves. There's a famous phrase, Bishvili Nivra Eilam, that the world was created for me alone. And it's very easy for a person to think about this phrase and get haughty and to feel very full of themselves. But really, if you really understand what Bishvili Nivra Eilam means, that the world was created for me, and really believing that, is having an understanding of almost awe, that Hashem felt like the whole world would not be the same without me in it. And he, on a constant basis, is creating and recreating me for some huge mission and purpose. Hashem takes me way more seriously than I take myself. Let me at least lean into that and see where I could see his vision for me. What does he want from me? Obviously, he cares about what I do way more than I ever considered, right? So there's the Rebbe one time was speaking to Bachurim and he said, imagine this, that your alarm clock is set for 6:15, 5:45, whatever you want. And imagine that Hashem is standing at the foot of your bed before you wake up, before your alarm clock rings. And he's standing there waiting to see, as soon as it rings, if you're going to press snooze. Are you or are you not? Are you going to push off the mitzvah? Are you going to wake up ready to serve or not? I love the imagery of that because most Bachrim or me, I don't think, does Hashem really care if I wake up at 6:15 or 6:20? What does it really matter? But Hashem cares about every detail of your life. He's just standing there, waiting, watching, ready as always to support, to give, to love, to direct, to show you the way. And if we just had a little bit of an understanding of how much he cares and how invested he is, then maybe we would take it a lot more seriously. So Bishvili Nivra Elam is a great way to remind ourselves of our own greatness, our own immeasurable potential. And if we could just see ourselves the way Hashem is standing right here waiting to see us, then maybe it could help us, remind us of him and inspire a little bit more Yirah Shamayim, more of that deference and that respect for remembering that Hashem is our Melech, is our King. To conclude with a very beautiful story, there's a story about a man, his name was Rav Yisrael Noach Belinitsky. And he was a very tremendous chassid, and he lived for a very long time. He passed away when he was 99. And what's interesting about him is the way he met his wife. So the story goes that when he was in Russia, he got drafted to the army. And before he was officially drafted, he went to the Rebbe for help. He knew it was his time. He had probably received some sort of word that he was going to be drafted. So he went to the Rebbe and he asked the Rebbe, what should I do? And the Rebbe's words were, go to this man named Rav Itcha Disner, marry his daughter, and he will help you with the draft. So this man, Rav Yisrael Noach, didn't pause for a moment. He was a chassid, a bacher, but very much a chassid. And he picks up, doesn't even tell his parents, travels to the city where Rav Itcha was, literally knocks on the door and says, I'm here, the Rebbe sent me, I'm supposed to marry your daughter, and afterwards you're supposed to help me with the draft. And Rav Itcha had not received word from the Rebbe, had no idea what this was about, and did the responsible thing as a father and went to ask the Rebbe about this. Who's this bacher that you're asking me to marry my daughter off to? And this is the point of the story. Not just the incredible point that this boy, this bacher, immediately hears the Rebbe says, you have to marry this person, and without question just goes straight to the father-in-law and says, hey, we're supposed to get married. But the real point of the story is that when Rav Itcha asked the Rebbe, who's this bacher that you're giving to me here for my daughter? Like, tell me a little bit about him, inspire me. The Rebbe said, something I can say about him is that when he sits alone in his room, so he's all alone in his room, he's still afraid of Ol Malchus Shamayim. He still has Yirah Shamayim. No one's there. No one's looking over his shoulder. But he feels Yirah Shamayim even then. And that's what convinced Rav Itcha to let Rav Yisrael Noach to marry his daughter, and that's how that should have happened. But I think those words are so beautiful. What an incredibly high praise to receive from a Rebbe, that this bacher, even if he's alone in a room, no one's looking, no one's watching, he could do or think or feel anything. But he doesn't, because he feels Yirah Shamayim. He knows Yirah Shamayim. There's a constant recognition, acknowledgement of Eibishter in his life. And that's what we're striving towards. And if anything, that is the energy of Elul, right? And not just is Hashem a constant in our life, but he's available. I'm sure everyone's listening to Shirim about Melech Basadeh, but the idea is that Hashem is so accessible right now. And if we could just reach out and feel his closeness, allow ourselves to feel his closeness, then we'll be able to experience the point of what we're talking about here, the beginning of Perek Mem Aleph. The Yirah, the constant understanding of Hashem in my life, seeing him, seeing past all the things that are covering him, all the klipa in the world, all those shells, and instead see the truth. See his love and see his care and his specific doting attention to every aspect of our life. And the more that we can do this, the Alter Rebbe concludes, the more that we could experience the relationship. So we went through two different relationships, the relationship between an Av and a Ben. What's a Ben? A Ben is a son. It's a very close relationship we're talking about here. We were talking before about employee-employer. There's a lot of distance there. Melech and civilian, a lot of distance there. When we talk about an Av and a Ben, that's a very, very close relationship. And most people who are considered Ben, a son, are the more inspired people, the people that the Alter Rebbe discuss in the beginning of the Tanya, where we're talking about tzaddikim who are inspired, who are living in a place of constantly recognizing Hashem in their lives. But the Alter Rebbe says here that he wants Ben Shana Se'eved, that even those people who are inspired, who let's say are loving, they experience chesed, their neshamas are constantly flying up to Hashem, they want to connect with Him, they want to attach with Him. Even those people need to experience the same thing as an Eved. They need to experience the grounding of Yira, of this is what Hashem wants from me. Kabbalas Omach HaShamayim, recognizing Hashem and performing what Hashem wants me to perform. Do what Hashem wants me to do. Be the person Hashem wants me to be. And in that way, the Alter Rebbe is saying it's so accessible to everyone. And not just that, the Alter Rebbe is saying, not just for the layman, but even for the tzaddikim, they have to do the same thing that the layman has to do. Be inspired by Yira and not just by Ava. So hopefully we can take this class and walk through the next week, because we'll be meeting again next week, B'ezras Hashem, with a little bit more of a heightened awareness of the Eibishter in my life, and share it with other people, share it with the relationships that you have, share it with a husband, share it with your children, share it with a friend, share it with the Trader Joe's guy. You had an experience of awareness of God. That's beautiful. The more that you share it with others and you affirm it to yourself, the more that you grow the experience. It's not just enough to be like, oh, that was Hashgacha Pratis, that was so nice. The more that you share it, the more recognition and awareness you have, the more it grows. So looking forward to seeing you all next week, and have a beautiful week. Close that.